You're watching Force 13 Live. The current time is 2:23 PM UTC, 3:23 PM here in the UK. The current temperature here is 72 degrees, and we have several systems active across the Pacific right now. We have a number of systems, as a matter of fact, 4 or perhaps 5 considered to be tropical storms. Fernanda is perhaps a different story. We've put it down as a depression for the time being. It was a depression earlier. They upgraded it to a tropical storm. We expect it will be downgraded again later at their update in around half an hour. Could be wrong, we'll see. But the main feature I would say right now is what the priority is, and you're looking at it there. That's Tropical Storm Roki. I'm not sure on the pronunciation on that. Usually when there's an E at the end, particularly when you have the Central Pacific examples that we had, such as Loki and Ioki. I'm not sure whether it is pronounced with the E at the end, but that's only one facet of it. There are Signal 1 standby signals in effect for Hong Kong and Macau right now, in anticipation of that storm, which was named earlier today not far from the northern tip of the Philippines. It is now moving closer towards China, expected to make landfall there later today. UTC, it will be morning over in China, probably in fact towards the afternoon evening hours of Sunday that the storm will actually make landfall. At the moment it's 147 miles southeast of Shantou, and it is around 250 miles or so, I believe, away from Hong Kong. As you can see on the Japanese Meteorological Agency's map that just went by there, it's expected to pass just north of Hong Kong. Of course, we've got several other systems. Nauru further out to sea over the open Pacific waters, which is expected to have a very interesting track over the next few days, circling and circling as some models hint at. The GFS model went loopy on it not so long ago, didn't it? In recent runs. I think it still is being very bullish, but by the looks of things I would suggest that it may well become category 3, perhaps more, but we'll wait and see. May not even get that far, of course. I believe the JTWC's last forecast, I haven't been looking recently, but I saw one from some time ago that said it would be a minimal typhoon in the next 5 days. However, it could then move towards the west again after moving east, and then towards the south into those warmer waters again, and could intensify further. To the east, you've got Kulap, another storm that formed yesterday or the day before. The intensities of all these storms, by the way, are as follows. According to the Japanese Meteorological Agency, the officials, Roki has winds of 40 miles per hour, Nauru has winds of 50 miles per hour, and Kulap has winds of 45. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center disagrees at this time. I believe they have Kulap at 60 miles per hour, by the way. As far as pressures are concerned, Roki 1002, Nauru 998, and Kulap 1004. And the other tropical depression, marked 8W by the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, located just off Hainan Island, China, is at 35 miles an hour and 1002 millibars. In the Eastern Pacific, the Central Pacific Hurricane Center is issuing advisories on Tropical Storm Fernanda, which had winds of 40 miles per hour and a pressure of 1004 millibars. It may well weaken to tropical depression again at the next update, which is due in less than half an hour. In the Eastern Pacific, we've got Tropical Storm Greg, which has winds of 50 miles per hour and a pressure of 1001 millibars. You've also got Tropical Depression 9E with winds of 35 miles an hour and a pressure of 1006, likely to become a tropical storm, could even be a significant hurricane. In between, you've got an Invest which had a 90% chance of development, and we're expecting it to become the next tropical depression at the next update within half an hour's time, and that will become Tropical Depression 10E. Greg is at 15 degrees north and 123.1 west. 9E is at 9.6 north, 96.6 degrees west. None of these storms are affecting any land areas. Indeed, Fernanda isn't even expected to affect Hawaii in the truest sense, though it could affect the area with its rainfall, though we do not expect it will impact the area as a tropical storm or even as a tropical depression. The Western Pacific storms, Noru and Kulap, are not expected to affect any land areas, but if there is a change in the forecast and Noru moves further west than expected, it could affect the Ogasawara Islands of Japan, or indeed the mainland, but we really are not expecting that. Kulap, likewise, though it's expected to get tangled in with Noru's influence and they'll probably end up circling each other to a degree, Noru will probably win. So Roki is the only named storm that is affecting or going to affect land. There are still no warnings out in China yet, as far as I'm aware. Signal 1 standby warnings are in effect in Hong Kong and Macau. Of course, Tropical Depression 8W off the coast of Hainan could affect that area with its rainfall, and I'll try and get some information on rain rates shortly. I'll be back with more in a few moments. It would appear at this time as though rainfall accumulation totals from the satellite derivations are not available and haven't been available for a few days. There has also been an issue with the Himawari satellite today, or at least an issue in getting them out there publicly, because there's been no imagery on any of the NOAA floaters since around 6 AM UTC, nor have they appeared on any other of the American websites. I'm currently taking a look at the Japanese websites to see whether there has been any more recent satellite imagery on there. If you've got any questions or comments for us, send them in and I will be taking a look at those shortly. And after taking a look at some more satellite imagery that has appeared on the Japanese-owned websites, I have to say that the situation hasn't changed so much in terms of the satellite imagery since the imagery on the NOAA floaters ceased at 6 AM. I expect that they will return at some point. These gaps can be somewhat common, but at the present time we are flying a little bit blind until we get some new good quality imagery. Start your message with Force 13, all in text, and I'll get to your questions and comments. Some people are speculating as to what sort of intensities we're going to be seeing out of the storms. Let me see if I can offer any sort of help on that by taking a look at what all the models are saying at present. We'll begin with all of the Western Pacific activity. The most easiest one to talk about and perhaps dismiss is Roki, of course, because it doesn't have long until making landfall. The HWRF is pretty bullish today, saying that it will reach 60 miles an hour before making landfall. It's not got much time to do that, but that's what the HWRF says. The officials, or, well, not necessarily the officials, but the JTWC, I don't think they're predicting any strengthening. I don't think the Japanese Meteorological Agency are either, but I'm yet to confirm that. But I should imagine that they are not. As for Kulap, that is a fairly straightforward case as well. We expect that it is peaking or about to peak, and that gradual weakening will take place from here on in as it moves towards the west. The models are a little bit split as to which direction it will actually go in. The consensus has it under the influence of Noru. By that I mean doing a very loose circular motion around the northern periphery of Noru. However, the HWRF thinks it will peel away towards the northwest and move towards the Japanese island of Hokkaido, but it won't get there. As for Tropical Depression 8W, the HWRF pretty bullish on that one as well. 60 miles an hour it says. I doubt that will happen, though it could become a weak tropical storm before making landfall on Hainan and then moving in towards Vietnam in a similar fashion to Talas last week. As for Noru, the GFS we know went crazy on that. I believe the ECMWF did that for a while as well. But looking at the NavGem and the HWRF, they're both saying Category 1 only. And that is also what the Joint Typhoon Warning Center is going with at present. We've also, of course, got Invest 99W, which could pull up a surprise or two as well. Some models were hinting that that would move towards the northwest, towards Taiwan, as a very significant typhoon as well. HWRF is saying Category 2. CMC, I believe, is saying Category 1. And looking at the Eastern Pacific systems, to shed some light on those perhaps, or perhaps not. Tropical Depression 9E, the models are fairly in fair agreement on that, though most of them take it a little bit further south than the National Hurricane Center's prediction, apart from the GFS. Most models think that it will get to Category 2, possibly Category 3, as suggested by the CMC and the HWRF. As for Tropical Storm Greg, that's likely to shift towards the west and then towards the northwest, then west again. Most models are taking it a little bit further north than the NHC's forecast track. The HMON says that it will get to 85 miles per hour, the HWRF 75 miles an hour, both Category 1. CMC saying it will get just shy of Category 1, pretty much every model is saying that Greg's not done yet. Not only that, that it's not reached its peak yet either. Fernanda is almost dead as it moves towards Hawaii. No model, I believe, is predicting any further strengthening. And I don't believe that any of them have it as a tropical depression over Hawaii either. So I don't think there'll be any need for any watches or warnings, but there could be some rain concerns. According to the HWRF though, however, rainfall is not likely to reach even 2 inches over the islands. And for Invest 99E, which we're expecting will now be Tropical Depression 10E, the HMON says in the long term it will strengthen significantly, and most models are saying it will curve towards the south slightly as it gets towards 130 west, moving further south towards 10 north, and that allows storms to intensify significantly. HMON thinks that it will get to 125 miles an hour in 5 days. The HWRF says it will peak on day 4 with winds of 115 miles an hour. The CMC also says it will peak on day 4, but only as a category 2. The Central Pacific Hurricane Center are the first to update at this hour, and they have done, with Fernanda as a tropical storm still, with winds of 40 miles per hour and a pressure of 1005 millibars. It's 570 miles east of Hilo, Hawaii, and 760 miles east of Honolulu. It's still moving west, or at 280 degrees, at 9 miles per hour. Tropical storm force winds extend outward up to 45 miles from the center. The next updates from the Japanese Meteorological Agency are expected in 1 hour. The National Hurricane Center for the East Pacific will update momentarily. There's a view outside Force 13 HQ at this time. It's a warm day here, 75 degrees, bearing in mind the average in this country, in this area for July is around 68 or 69 degrees. So we are looking fairly warm today after a few days of inclement weather, which ended a rather warm spell prior to that. That's just a small window into what is going on here at Force 13 HQ. And these are the pictures that we are showing you of all of the storms that we have active, with Roki being the one of priority. The next names in the Eastern Pacific are Hillary and Irwin. The next name in the Atlantic is Emily. And the current time is 2:43 p.m. UTC. Don't forget Force 13's predictions for this year. storm-wise, in terms of storm totals, are as follows. In the Atlantic, we're expecting 15 named storms, 8 hurricanes and 4 majors. The Eastern Pacific, 15 named storms, 10 hurricanes and 5 majors. The West Pacific, 25 named storms, 15 typhoons and 10 majors. And the North Indian, 5 named storms and 2 hurricane-strength cyclones. That forecast came out on May 26th. There may be a new one coming up in the near future, but nothing at this present moment, so at present we are sticking to that forecast. Let's talk more about what the warning we have in effect is, what it actually means in Hong Kong and Macau. A standby signal number 1 is in force for those two areas. This means that a tropical cyclone now centered within 800 kilometers of Hong Kong may affect that area, and indeed of Macau as well. Roki was 370 kilometers east-southeast of Hong Kong at 10 p.m. local time. And they're calling it a depression there, notably, but we believe that it is a tropical storm, and quite easily as well, looking at the satellite imagery. I don't believe Hong Kong will be too adversely affected by this system unless it jogs west, in which it will deliver some significant rainfall. However, we do not expect it to intensify very much. Its wind speeds right now are expected to be around 40 miles per hour, and we expect it to strengthen slightly before making landfall in China at around 12 p.m. UTC on Sunday. Shortly we should have updates from the National Hurricane Center for the Eastern Pacific, but as far as I gather there is nothing new out there yet. I believe it will designate Tropical Depression 10E, but we are still yet to receive confirmation on that one. At this moment in time, there's nothing else for me to say until I break in for any news, but we are expecting the National Hurricane Center will update within the next few minutes. This will be Tropical Depression 10 if it forms at the next update, which is due at any moment. That's what it looks like. I certainly think it's a tropical depression at this point, and we're waiting for confirmation. It was put in by the ATCF system, but we're waiting for the National Hurricane Centre's update on it. But we have cause to say that it is a tropical depression at this point, and I should think so. This is Force 13 Live. We're showing you coverage of all of the systems that are currently active, which there are quite a few. Start your message with Force 13 if you'd like to get in touch with us. The National Hurricane Centre have now confirmed that Tropical Depression 10E has formed, and they've just issued their public advisory. It's got winds of 35 miles per hour. It's what we're looking at on the screen right now. It's moving west at 7 miles per hour, and it's got a pressure of 1005 millibars. Its current position 14.7 north, 112.8 degrees west. That makes it 595 miles south-southwest of the southern tip of Baja California. The forecast for Tropical Depression 10E is for it to reach 70 miles per hour according to the National Hurricane Centre, though I do advise you that these sorts of forecasts are pretty normal in the Pacific. They often go with a predicted intensity near hurricane strength on the 5-day forecast. Due to the high amount of uncertainty in the eastern Pacific, storms can intensify rather quickly, though of course the tracks of these systems are rather predictable. Certainly at this time of year anyway. Updates will also occur on the other systems shortly if they haven't already. Tropical Depression 9E remains a depression, 35 miles per hour and a pressure of 1006 millibars. Greg is updated with winds of 50 miles per hour and a pressure of 1001 millibars. and the latest prediction from them is that it will weaken slightly, remain at 50 miles per hour and intensify a little bit more on Monday. This is Force 13 Live. We'll be back in a few minutes. Coverage continues in a moment. You can follow Force 13's outlets, the website force13.co.uk, at your service at any time. You can also find us on YouTube, the channel, search Force 13, all in text, and subscribe if you haven't already. You can also find us on Facebook at Force 13, and it's at Force 13 on Twitter, that's the handle to contact us there. You can also add Fool13 on Skype, that's FOOL13, and add extension 9094 on Discord for tropical weather chat. You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. This is Force 13 Live. The current time is 3 PM UTC this Saturday, July 22nd. We've got lots of systems active, a plethora of them perhaps you might say. Where do we begin? Well, we begin with Tropical Storm Roki, which is moving towards the coast of China. That is of our highest priority right now because it's the only storm that has triggered warnings of any kind. Signal 1 standby alerts are in effect on the coast of Hong Kong and Macau. There are no warnings yet in effect in China as of 1 hour ago. I doubt that has changed. After that, it is pretty unclear as to where our priorities lie, as there are many other systems active right now. I guess the priority is the breaking news. If you've not heard it yet, Tropical Depression 10E has just formed in the Eastern Pacific. That is the one that was in the middle of Greg and 9E, if you've been following. 10E is located at 14.7 north, 112.8 degrees west. It's got winds of 35 miles an hour and a pressure of 1005 millibars. 9E is located much further east, to the south of Mexico. It's at 10 degrees north, 98.2 degrees west, with winds of 35 miles an hour and a pressure of 1006. Greg is located furthest west in the Eastern Pacific Basin, with winds of 50 miles per hour and a pressure of 1001 millibars. It's at 15.1 north, 124.2 west. In the Central Pacific, Tropical Storm Fernanda remains so, barely, with winds of 40 miles per hour and a pressure of 1004 millibars. It's at 19 degrees north, 145.4 degrees west. In the Western Pacific, we're using the numbers from the Japanese Meteorological Agency, which is the map that you see on your screen right now. From east to west, we begin with Kulap, which has winds of 45 miles an hour and a pressure of 1004 millibars, moving west at 13 knots. It's at 30 degrees north, 169.6 degrees east. That storm, according to the JMA, is expected to peak with winds of 45 miles per hour, which is where it's at right now. We've also got Tropical Storm Noru, which has winds of 50 miles per hour and is almost stationary with a pressure of 998 millibars. The JMA say that it will reach an intensity in 3 days of 90 miles per hour. Roki, we've already discussed. The JMA doesn't think it will intensify at all before making landfall. Some models do, however. And a tropical depression, 8W, located near Hainan Island in China, with a pressure of 1002 millibars and winds of 35 miles an hour. It too is expected to become a tropical storm in the next 24 hours. And warnings will probably be issued for that one as well, so those will be our two priorities. I haven't been checking many messages recently, but I don't believe there are any directed particularly towards me, but if there are, do start your message with Force 13, all in text in the comments section. So to repeat the breaking news there, Tropical Depression 10 has formed in the Eastern Pacific. TD9 and TD10 could be named fairly soon. I'll be back in a few moments whilst I gather some more information. One system that I have neglected to mention at the top of the hour was Invest 99W, which is located in the Philippine Sea and could bypass the eastern Philippines this week and move towards Taiwan. Some models earlier predicted that 99W would become a significant typhoon. We'll of course be monitoring that one as well. Let's take some questions. There was a question earlier Do we expect the Atlantic to warm up soon? It's a very interesting question, and quite often what happens in the Pacific transfers to the Atlantic some weeks later, so based on this you never know what might happen in the Atlantic as we enter August. I think it will be an interesting month. I think there will be some activities and perhaps one or two significant storms that will occur in August and in September. I still strongly believe that there will be a west to east Caribbean tracking storm, east to west rather, Caribbean tracking storm of a significant intensity this year. I think is very likely. Storms similar to Emily of 05, Felix, even Ivan perhaps. Maybe not those intensities, but perhaps those sorts of tracks. I think recurvatures will be further towards the west as well overall. We've seen with the recent storms that we've had in the Atlantic that they've impressed much further south than what you'd normally expect. Just take a look at where Don had to go. It was a fairly southerly storm, and that was after what we already had with Brett and 4L as well. There will be, I believe, some more low latitude activity in the Atlantic. The areas that I was most concerned about back in May was the Yucatan Peninsula and Mexico as a whole, and the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Those are the areas that I feel may be most at risk of a particularly bad system. By that I mean bad relative to what they normally expect. For instance, if we're talking about the Gulf Coast, they get storms rather commonly, or Florida, they get storms rather commonly. I think it's going to be an average year for those areas, but that does not mean that there may not be a bad storm for those areas, because on average that does happen quite often. Not the worst ones, of course, but significant ones. So those are some things to bear in mind. But it doesn't appear as though there will be Atlantic activity in the next few days. But I will quickly check that one. As said, there are Signal 1 standby alerts in effect for Hong Kong and Macau. Those are the only warnings in effect right now, despite the 10 systems that we have active at this moment in time. After looking at one or two model runs for the Atlantic, it appears that storm activity in the next 5 days there is exceedingly unlikely. The following week there may be a small chance. Now, there are one or two new questions. Do you think New York and New Jersey will be hit by a hurricane this year? I will consult my records for that one to give you a educated answer, I guess you could say. According to what my predictions were earlier this year, we gave that area between a 20 and 30% chance of tropical storm conditions and a less than 10% chance of hurricane conditions. So a tropical storm, I should say, is rather possible, maybe not likely, but possible there. But I don't think there'll be anything stronger than that. Certainly not a Sandy, if that's what you were thinking of. Now, there was one other question there as well, I believe. Yes, the average ACE amounts for this time. At the moment we are at 140 something. 143.5 was the latest ACE total as of yesterday, and you can see it on that graphic there. How does that compare? Well, 1960 is the year that we're watching right now, because that year was the quietest year in terms of ACE. Well, not in terms of ACE, but I assume it's in terms of ACE, but I've not calculated it. But in terms of storm activity in numbers, 1960 was the quietest. It had, in the satellite era, it had an ACE of 151.0 at this moment in time. So we are 8 points behind that. Other years to consider. Well, I haven't actually done the records from any other years apart from 2015, which had a staggering 417.17 by this point in time. So if you're going to compare it to 2015, we are 3 times quieter to date so far. Not as bad as it used to be, though. At one point, we were 10 times quieter than that, I believe. That was quite early on in the year. But we have caught up a little bit towards the average, but we are still well below. I expect that the average would be somewhere in between where we are now and 2015, so somewhere around 250 mark. But at around this time of year, the ACE numbers rise pretty quickly with new storms, and some strong storms start forming around about now. 1960, by the way, in the next 2 weeks, late July into early August, had 3 strong Category 4 storms of winds of 145 miles per hour or higher. So we'd have to match that if we were going to keep up with 1960. We'll get back to more questions shortly and more information on the storms, but there isn't too much to tell you at this point. What I can tell you is what we already know, and that is the breaking news that happened in the last 15 minutes, that Tropical Depression 10E has formed in the Eastern Pacific. Not long ago, around 2 hours or so now, I uploaded a video about Tropical Storm Roki, and I may as well go ahead and play that video now, if for people who haven't seen it, to tell you a little bit more about what that storm in particular is expected to do. Update 1 on Tropical Storm Roki, which has formed in the South China Sea to the southwest of Taiwan, is heading towards China over the next 24 hours, where it will make landfall tomorrow, not too far from Shantou. At the moment, as of 3 PM UTC, July 22nd, it's got winds of 40 miles an hour, a pressure of 1002 millibars, and it's at 21.6 north, 118.0 east. There are Signal 1 standby warnings in effect for Hong Kong and Macau, no warnings yet in China. Landfall, as I say, expected in 24 hours or so. It could intensify a little bit before then, could get towards 50, maybe even 60 miles an hour if it really pushes for it, before it runs out of time and moves inland and dissipates without incident. Right now it's 147 miles southeast of Shantou, 199 miles south of Xiamen, and 255 miles east-southeast of Hong Kong. Right now it's only a stage 1 on the CDPS scale, but damages could still occur, especially in the form of flooding-related damages. Over the next day or two, the wind field is not expected to increase by too much, and it's expected to make landfall there on Monday morning over in China, or Sunday evening actually, overnight hours. Into Monday morning it will move inland, and then it will go off towards the northwest by Tuesday, and it'll be long gone by then as it heads slowly towards Changsha. Only expecting tropical storm conditions from this system but wind gusts could approach hurricane or typhoon strength. Right now, sea surface temperatures are very warm indeed, around 29, maybe even 30 degrees Celsius where the storm is right now, taking advantage of the lack of typhoons so far this year. Of course, there's the wind shear graphic, that's also very low and favourable, a little bit higher towards the north there, very slightly, but the big wall of high wind shear is still several hundred miles away, and Roki will not be affected by that. As it moves towards the northwest, here's the latest satellite imagery. The visible right now, that's not actually particularly recent because the Himawari satellite imagery has been down for some hours, but this is what it was looking like earlier today. And moving in a northwesterly direction there, and I don't really know whether it's intensified any further since then due to the lack of imagery, but the Japanese Meteorological Agency have kept it at 40 miles an hour at the latest update, which is no change upon what it was 6 hours ago or more. Elsewhere in the tropics, you may be aware that a lot's going on right now. We have plenty of tropical cyclones active. These are by Force 13's estimates. We expect that Fernanda will be weakened to a tropical depression by... And of course that is a fairly old version now. As we know, since then Tropical Depression 10E did form in the Eastern Pacific, though by 12 o'clock there we had it down as a tropical depression already, because I certainly was anticipating that to occur due to its fantastic appearance that it had at the time. So let's go back to what we have right now. And just by the way, if you wanted to know what the storm totals were for 2017 so far, 7 tropical depressions, 23 tropical storms, 5 category 1s, 2 category 2s, 3 category 3s, 2 category 4s and 1 category 5, making the number for 2017 so far 36, which of course is quite low of course for a whole year, but it's caught up to just about 1914. It's one storm behind that entire year. Obviously it will take a while until we catch the more recent years, if we do. Now you saw in that image there before about the wind shear for Roki, and that is pretty low, so there could be room for intensification there. I think it was pretty low also for 8W out there as well, so that could also become a tropical storm. It's certainly expected to happen. But we've pretty much covered everything that there is to cover at this time, so I will probably be calling it a day at this point and return at a later time today to talk more about what's going on in the tropics and more storm updates which will occur later today. I would have done the updates in the conventional format like with Roki, but because I could not figure out which storm was of the most priority, I decided that to bring it live and to do updates on everything. The next update on Roki will probably occur at around 3 AM UTC, unless we do a tropical weather bulletin, which would occur at midnight UTC, so watch the channel at around that time. We may also go live with the team later on this evening, and they can give you their thoughts on what's going on across the Pacific right now, but the Atlantic remains quiet, and I'm afraid Atlantic fans, there's not much to watch at this moment in time apart from what's going on in the Pacific, showing the Atlantic how it's done for the time being. Well, the Atlantic can always spring a surprise or two, and we'll be ready for it in case that does happen. We'll be back soon. Thanks for watching and stay tuned.